America is a country of immigrants, and historians have separated American immigration into Old and New. Old immigration is dated from the late 1700s to the late 1800s, and New immigration is from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. The two periods overlapped as Old immigration continued into New. There are three regions that the Old immigrants primarily came from. The first group came from England, Scotland, and Ireland in Western Europe. The second group from Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia and Northern Europe, and the third group of immigrants were Africans. Typically, the European immigrants were Protestant with the exception of the Irish Catholics. The people coming to the U.S. had already experienced representative democracy and were literate or skilled, some even wealthy. The wealth and skills of immigrants aided them as they were attempting to fit into American society. Old European immigrants came to America to find political and religious freedom after facing oppression, to escape dire situations in their native countries, and for economic benefits, hoping to find a job and to live the American rags to riches dream. Immigrants bringing different cultures helped shape the American identity, and they added to the U.S. economy by providing a labor force. Unlike other groups of immigrants, Africans did not voluntarily come to America, but were instead brought to the country to work as slaves on southern plantations. The slaves were vital to America and its economy because the entire society in the South was based around agriculture, the section's main source of income. Slavery was an issue that greatly divided the country sectionally and politically, eventually leading to the secession of the South and the Civil War. Africans were enslaved in the South until after the Civil War and faced discrimination in both the South and the North. Even after slavery was abolished, there were still severe black codes, segregation, and racism. During the 1800s, the waves of old and new immigrants led to the rise of nativism, and nativist and anti-immigration feelings swept through America. From these feelings came the Know-Nothing Party, also known as the American Party. The party felt that government offices should be designated for native-born Americans of English or Scottish descent, that immigrants should gain citizenship at age 21, and that immigration from Catholic countries should be limited. The American discrimination against Catholics was a result of a Protestant America. Ethnicity and religion played a factor in the targeting of nativism discrimination. However, the source was usually economic, because immigrants were able to undercut Americans for labor jobs because they were willing to work for cheaper wages. The undercutting of American jobs caused economic insecurity in Americans and the belief that America should be run by Americans. Although old immigrants continued to come to America at this time, new immigration began during the Civil War and lasted until the early 1900s. New immigration consisted of Southern and Eastern Europeans from Italy, Russia, Poland, and Greece, as well as Asians. New immigrants came to the U.S. for a variety of reasons. Some immigrants came to escape political oppression, and many Jews migrated to escape religious oppression. Lower-class Europeans left looking for employment and jobs, which were provided to them during America's Industrial Revolution. They hoped of embodying the United States' rag-to-riches dream. Some of the immigrants were called birth of passage immigrants, who looked to only reside in America for a temporary time, later to return home to their families with money earned from working. The new group of immigrants brought more diverse languages, religions, and traditions to America, making it a more multicultural country. The labor they provided helped to boost industrialization and expand urbanization. Action by the federal government was taken to limit new immigration through the National Origins Act of 1924, which classified immigrants as non-quota or quota. Non-quota immigrants included wives and families of U.S. citizens, students under 15, and religious professionals. All other immigrants were considered to be quota. Quota immigrants who were related to U.S. citizens or were skilled in agriculture were favored. The ratio of quota and non-quota immigrants allowed in America favored traditional old immigrants from Northern and Western Europe, because most Americans claimed English, German, or Irish ancestry. New immigration was stifled by this act. The National Origins Act of 1929 limited the total number of immigrants allowed into the U.S. to 150,000 people. These two acts allowed for biased limitations on immigration based off of nationality. America during new immigration. The Asian immigrants came to the U.S. to find mining jobs during the California Gold Rush, hoping that their work would pay off and reward them with money to bring back to their families. The new group of immigrants brought more diverse languages, religions, and traditions to America, making it a more multicultural country. The Chinese provided labor to fuel the California Gold Rush. The distinct clash between American and Asian culture, religion, and language led to discrimination, which affected the Asian immigrants much as it affected the Southern and Eastern European immigrants. And the Asian immigrants tended to ethnically group together in sections of their cities, creating Chinatowns. In 1982, limitations were made on the number of Chinese immigrants, then banning the Chinese from coming to the U.S. The ban was repealed in 1943 because of the importance of China as an ally against Japan. In a repeat of nativist fears, Westerners feared the yellow peril of Chinese immigration and worried about American job security. Disdain towards the Chinese came from nativists, previous victims of nativism, and from miners who felt threatened by the Chinese who worked for lower wages. The U.S. government justified the act by claiming jobs were being stolen by the Chinese and saying the Chinese were sending American gold back to China. Despite the ban, many Chinese still came into the U.S. using false identification. Even the Chinese who were able to immigrate into the U.S. after the ban were still discriminated against and treated poorly. Ellis Island housed a U.S. immigration station that opened in 1892. 12 million people migrated to the U.S. through Ellis Island from its opening to its official closing in 1954. Immigrants were inspected and examined on ships and at Ellis Island by medical and legal professionals to determine entry. 98% of the immigrants arriving were granted entry, and others were denied because they had a contagious disease or the legal examiner predicted that they would become criminals. Immigrants of both new and old periods entered through Ellis Island, however the majority of people were from Eastern and Southern Europe. Though Ellis Island was the largest port of entry for immigrants coming to America, there were other major points of entry also used. Western and Northern Europeans arrived in New England ports and major cities. Between 40 and 60% of slaves were brought into the U.S. through ports near Charleston and Savannah. Southern and Eastern Europeans mostly arrived in the U.S. through New York, and Asians entered the U.S. through ports in California, mainly San Francisco's Angel Island, called the Ellis Island of the West. Multiple theories have been developed about how immigrants and the U.S. culture affected one another. The melting pot theory originated from a play, also called The Melting Pot, by Israel Zangwill. Based off of the play, the theory is that the cultures of different ethnic groups coming to America will melt together into a new American culture. In short, the melting pot theory suggests that immigrants would actually change the American culture. The theory of assimilation is that immigrants adapt to American culture, picking up enough American practices to become American, while still retaining parts of their native cultures.